Hi, this recording is for consecutive interpretation, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the introduction. So talking about interpretation, it's quite different from translation, even though we can call interpretation as translation activities. But when we translate, we're going to do this most of the time written, but in interpretation we're going to translate orally. There are two most well-known techniques in interpretation. The first one is consecutive interpretation, and the second one is simultaneous interpretation. So although this video is more about consecutive interpretation, but because this is an introduction, we're going to be talking about the other one too, which is simultaneous interpretation. So in number one, consecutive interpretation, there are two techniques used by people usually, but to differ this from simultaneous interpretation, in consecutive interpretation, the speaker and the interpreter will talk at different times, so they will take turn. The interpreter speaks or translates after the speaker speaks. So the speaker will speak normally only one sentence or two sentences or one thought, but then he has to be considering whether the interpreter is able to remember the thought and so on. And then after that he stops, and then the interpreter speaks to translate the message said by the speaker. Here, the two techniques usually done or used by interpreters, as the first one is with notes. So when with notes, usually this one, the speaker can just go on for minutes, for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, or even if it's possible for half an hour, speaking. While he's speaking, what the interpreter does usually is only taking notes, but of course not to write down every word that the speaker says, but it's more like taking notes for the keywords. So he will be able to remember the ideas. Just by looking at the keywords, the interpreter remembers the idea said by the speaker earlier. And then after the speaker stops, and then the interpreter starts translating by relying on the notes and the memory that he has. That's the technique in which the interpreter relies on the notes. And then the other technique for consecutive interpretation is without notes. So here, in order to do this successfully, the speaker will have to speak only one sentence at a time, for example, or two sentences, or one very short thought. And then after that, after he stops, and then the interpreter starts translating. So in this case, the interpreter will have to heavily or completely rely on remembering what the speaker has just said. So these two techniques. And then what about simultaneous interpretation? It's quite different. As we can see from the name, how it's named, simultaneous means that both speaker and interpreter speak at the same time. Well, not exactly at the same time, because the interpreter will have to wait first for the speaker to speak. But then soon after the speaker starts talking, and then the interpreter also starts interpreting. When both of them are in front of people, normally sometimes that will distract our minds because we hear two voices at the same time, two speakers speaks at the same time. But when it's in conference, for example, where interpreters stay in a different areas, that will not a problem. Okay? So this one is more difficult for us to do, and then you can try later practicing both consecutive and simultaneous interpretations, and you look at what kind of skills you can spot skills that you need to have in order to be successful being an interpreter here. So those two techniques. Then what do we have to have? Okay, so there are requirements to be an interpreter. Well, I think number one is linguistic capability. So in this case, you will have to be able to understand and then to speak grammatically both the source and the target languages. Because sometimes especially when it's without notes, for example, you will have to communicate back to the speaker when it's needed. Okay, but most of the time you will have to be able to speak and to understand structures, idioms, and expressions said by the speaker, so that you're able to translate to the listeners or to the audience. So linguistic capability is really, really needed. Listening skills and so on, that's included in linguistic capability. And then you will also have to have like cultural knowledge. Things related to cultures that might influence the way the speaker speaks, the idea that the speaker says to the listeners, and to understand phrases, to understand terms that will depend on our cultural knowledge. So we have to be culturally knowledgeable when we become an interpreter. And then public speaking skill. So we have to be able to speak in front of people with confidence, for example, and gestures and our eye contacts and so on, because we'll be watching by people, especially when we don't live in a booth when interpreting for people. So public speaking skills in which you maintain eye contact and gestures and so on. And then confidence, I've mentioned confidence. You have to be convincing in conveying the messages said by the speaker. And then you have to be friendly. So it's friendliness, because we can see this, friendliness friendly to the people and to the speaker and so on. But then there's one more that you have to be, you have to have, which is that you must be an omnivorous reader, voracious and omnivorous. Okay, so voracious means that you must be like greedy, but and then in reading you must love reading, because this will help you in understanding ideas and speakers and native speakers of English, if it's English, and because you know topics, your general knowledge and so on. So you must be voracious for that. And omnivorous, it means that you don't limit yourself to particular kinds of reading, like, okay, I don't read laws, I read literatures, I don't read economics, I read computers, for example. So you must be a person that loves reading anything. You will have benefits from this. You will get benefits in which that you will be good at many topics, specifically, this will help you when translating or when interpreting for people. So that's the introduction. So start building up your capabilities, and while we continue our lessons, we're going to put this into practice, especially the consecutive interpretations. Thank you for watching.